Move on to the final priority, Dr. Katherine Connolly, second.
Minister, my question is in the context of the utter failure of the state to protect 3 young children, as you know, who the Central Criminal Court last year was told were sexually abused and raped on a weekly basis between the ages of 6 and 10 while they were in foster care in Tuam, County Galway. My question is, the independent review panel took over to have an investigation. We are now 2019. The first disclosure was 2007, the second 11, and the next one in 13, and we have no result from the independent review panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. The shocking abuse suffered by these very brave young women while in foster care in the early 2000s has disrupted and deeply impacted their lives, and I'm very conscious of the significant public interest in the case. The Deputy will be aware that the review process begun by the National Review Panel in 2016 was paused at the request of An Garda Síochána to allow criminal proceedings to conclude. Following the conclusion of the criminal case and sentencing of the perpetrator, the review was resumed and has now been completed. I understand that the report is extensive. It contains very detailed personal information regarding the cases examined. I am very mindful of the vulnerability of the young people involved. TUSLA must strike a balance between meeting the public interest through the publication of the review and protecting the well-being of victims who were children in state care at the time. The well-being of the young people must be to the fore, and the process regarding the decision about publication must involve them. It is essential that they have an opportunity to understand the findings and to offer their views on next steps. And the timing of this process will be determined then by the needs of the young people. TUSLA has advised my officials that they are currently in the process of taking the necessary steps to consult with the young people involved in the review. It is important to me that those most affected are given the time to give their views and prepare themselves before anything further is put into the public domain. However, I am most anxious that the matter of publication is settled at the earliest possible time, having regard to all of the circumstances of this case. It's critically important that the facts from the review and the learning from it should be made public, subject to protecting the young people affected as soon as possible. I will continue to engage with TUSLA and urge timely conclusion of the consultation process and revert to the Deputy as soon as possible.
Minister, I have to say your reply is totally unacceptable. The protection and vulnerability of the children was never in the minds of the Health Executive nor TUSLA, I have to say. An independent review panel was set up. Back in April last year, in response to Deputy Lou MacDonald, the Taoiseach of this country said the publication of the report that was almost completed. Here we are in 19, it was only completed in December. It's with TUSLA. TUSLA is a body that Charlton has said had an inability to reflect. A public body paid for by the taxpayer has a fundamental duty of self-scrutiny in pursuit of the highest standards. The administration of TUSLA was sorely lacking in application and dedication to duty. In relation to the criminal proceedings, Charlton, a HIQA report that you commissioned, pointed out it is imperative that TUSLA ensures its own operational arrangements, etc., and do not allow criminal investigations to impede its statutory duty to safeguard children. The children were abused. The facts are out, unfortunately. The Central Criminal Court in Dublin heard all of those facts last year. Out of 29 sample charges, the man was convicted of 23. We know all of that. Unfortunately, the children who are now young adults know all of that. What they want is some type of accountability from the system and an independent review panel's report to be published. And if not, why not?
Thank you, Deputy. I, of course, understand, and it's important for you to outline the timeline and the issues and the concerns. I'm fully aware of that as well. Secondly, you raise a lot of the criticisms of TUSLA in relation to the Charlton Tribunal, as well as other, particularly the HIQA statutory investigation that I myself commissioned. So I am aware of that, and I think the Deputy is aware of the fact that measures have been put in place with the board and my ongoing work with the board in order to put in place plans to change that, and that we have an expert assurance group that oversees that, led by an independent chair. In relation to your second set of questions, Deputy, I do understand. I think what I'm trying to say is I think it is important that in the public interest that ultimately that this report is published. The answers that I'm giving you is that from the perspective of TUSLA and their work in that regard, that they need some time in order to consult with the people who the report is about prior to their decision to publish.
Final supplementary.
Minister, I welcome the fact that you're saying you would like the report to be published, if that's what I hear. I welcome that. I welcome that. But I can't stand here and not be frustrated on behalf of the people who have suffered and a system that is now heaping abuse onto abuse. I only criticise TUSLA because that's what I'm reporting from HEQA, I'm reporting from the Charlton report. Clearly they do good work. But in this situation, TUSLA took over from the Health Executive. They themselves are under scrutiny in relation to this. We have an independent review panel. Of course it's independent, but they've been engaged with this process since April 16. It's now February 19. The Charlton report reported within 2 years. He came back on a regular basis to give you updates. And the independent review panel can't update you on anything. In previous questions you told me they were independent, you couldn't interfere. Since then you've clarified that there are issues in relation to the independent review panel, further to an independent monitoring process from HEQA, which I can't get my hands on. I'd appreciate if you clarified that in relation to governance. But at this point, I want an absolute assurance that there'll be no more delay in relation to the publishing of the report so that we can empower people, and particularly those on the ground who have suffered, so they know there's accountability.
Thank you, Deputy. It would be my hope as well that it could be published as soon as possible. I think that my response is to you is that there is a process that TUSLA is going through right now in the context of awareness and changes in the organization in terms of their practices. And that the people involved and the social workers and the managers and their decisions and their discernment is that they need the time, as I said, to consult with the young people. My understanding is one of them has waived her right to anonymity, and not the other two not necessarily. And that's what's going on. I can assure you certainly that I will continue to request and urge them to conclude it as soon as possible, the process that they're engaged in, which I think that I need to respect their decision to work with the young people and to consult with them in the process of publishing the report.